Greetings, my fellow millennials, and welcome to another episode of the Millennial Reset, where we're coming together as a generation of burnout besties to reprogram, decondition, and heal. If you're new here, welcome to your new safe space. I'm your host, Peter Goose, your personal development and millennial mindset mentor, and thanks for being part of this shared journey of healing. So, what's the last thing you did to love on yourself? What's the last thing that you did for you and nobody else? And if you had an answer to that, then, high five to you for putting yourself first. But if you don't have an answer, and maybe you can't even remember the last time you actually did something to treat yourself, then at least you're not alone. And I know exactly what you're probably thinking here. Who has the time or energy these days for self-care? It's like if I'm not, using up all my time and energy on work, then it's going to my repeat fight or flight response. But one thing I've learned over these past, 2 years of this healing journey is that nobody's coming with a silver platter of more time to do the things that you want to do. And in a day and age where it's becoming more and more difficult to afford basic necessities, time truly is the new currency. And if you don't have much of it, then the tough truth is it's up to us to create it and carve out those opportunities that allow you to come back to center. But even when you do have those brief moments where nothing else is falling apart, it can be a challenge to embrace that peace and calm, because I think a lot of us have either forgotten or never even learned how to truly take care of ourselves. And on top of that, we've been conditioned to believe that rest is lazy and we should always be doing something productive. And for so many of us, we've been in this constant go, go, go survival mode for so long that even when you do have the downtime, it almost feels too weird for your brain to relax. So that's what we're talking about today. I'm going to be sharing with you my 3 biggest tips from my own journey of how to start prioritizing yourself and shifting your perceptions around self-care. So let's dive in. Number 1, understanding the relationship between source and resource. Because before we can even give ourselves permission to take better care of ourselves, we need to create the motivation, the awareness. We so often put the needs of others above ourselves. And, I don't know what it is about being millennials, especially the millennial mamas out there. Maybe it's because we don't want to raise our children in the same way that we were raised, but we give so much of ourselves to make sure that those around us have their needs met before ours. And we all know the age-old adage, put your mask on first before assisting others, but I think we forget about it in our own lives. And I think a lot of this goes back to our childhood, right? We were conditioned for this. Work really hard, rest is lazy, and if you're not getting ahead in life, then you're probably just not working hard enough. And when we tried to take a break from the hustle, even at a young age, we were told that rest is lazy and you need to get back to work. So we make ourselves believe that we just need to keep running in this marathon called life with no water breaks. And we end up draining ourselves to the point where our body gives us no other choice but to rest. And that's exactly what happened to me when I reached kind of my rock bottom in burnout. I was officially in freeze mode, dorsal vagal shutdown. Everything seemed literally impossible because my battery was at 0 and I never gave myself the time that I needed for a true recharge. I wanted so badly to pursue my goals and passions after taking a break from full-time work, but I just became more and more frustrated and beat myself up even more when I couldn't even do one thing without feeling completely exhausted. And it wasn't until I came to terms with this fact that, nothing was going to change without me changing first. Meaning that I had to start embracing the tough lesson that you can only be a resource for others and to yourself to the extent that your own source is filled first. I couldn't just keep forcing myself to do when my battery was officially dead. And that it's not really a choice of whether or not you recharge. It's just how long you force yourself to keep going anyways. So that's number one, coming to terms with the fact that you have to build your own source before you can be a resource. And while I wish it was just that simple, there's another big piece to this puzzle that prevents us from actually embracing self-care, which takes us to number two, which is around changing the narratives. Changing the narrative that rest is lazy to rest is productive. From self-care is selfish to self-care is mandatory and necessary. It's not just a catchphrase. It's a way of life. So, quick story here for y'all. I remember the first week after I left my full-time position to simply rest and heal. And I would tell myself, like, okay, Peter, you've got no one to report to, no responsibilities today. We can just lay down and rest. But every time I tried, that inner chatter just got louder and louder that said, what are you doing? Rest is lazy. You've got to get a paycheck somehow. Now get back up and get back to work. And even though I wanted so badly to just rest, period, the narrative that was living in my mind associated to rest that went all the way back to childhood talked me out of it. It was a subconscious belief that had been running my life in the background. And to change a belief in our minds, we not only have to have an alternative to replace it with, but we also have to give our brains enough evidence to accept that new belief as just or more true. And so for me, it was kind of like an experiment over time. My brain already knew what it was like to go, and do. And while it burned me out, I also realized that it kept me safe because I made that work for me for so long. That was my survival self in action. But my brain didn't have any evidence to support the belief that rest is productive. So, that's where I busted out my former teacher hat and I had to show it a new way. Even when all my brain wanted to do was anything productive, I had to start purposefully building in breaks where I would still allow myself to go, but just with water breaks built in. Even 10 minutes to do something else after, every hour or two. And then here's the key, besties. Giving yourself and your brain the opportunity to compare the results. How much was I able to get done by powering through the exhaustion versus how much was I able to accomplish after giving myself occasional breaks? And it's not even that I got that much more done with the breaks. The work and the project still got done, but it was the way that I felt during and after. When I taught my brain that rest can be productive, it started to view it as more and more true, with more and more evidence that I could run this marathon and still finish, but to stop for water breaks made it a whole lot easier. It allowed me to go from survival self to authentic self, to start thinking and acting in new ways that, didn't feel safe enough before. And the other shift that I think is super important here is, what is self-care and rest? Because sure, sleep is great, but rest means so much more than just rest for me today. My kind of new definition of rest is giving myself experiences that make me feel good. It's just that simple. Okay, well, maybe not that simple, because then the question becomes, what makes you feel good? And there came a time for me where I was, sleeping much better, but I still didn't feel motivated. All I wanted to do was bed rot. But sleep is just one part of a much larger equation here. Sleep helps your body regulate from one day to the next, but what about the regulation throughout the day? You just can't, plop down and take a nap whenever you feel stressed, although, wouldn't that solve most of the world's problems? So aside from sleep, I had to start experimenting to figure out what made me feel good. I started doing more sunset walks and hikes. I bought a bunch of adult coloring books. I learned how to crochet. And, I also tried things that did not make me feel good. Hot yoga. Ooh, I'm sure some of y'all out there love it, but definitely did not make me feel good walking out of there. But you just start trying different experiences and then give it a simple rating afterwards, right? Like, how did that make me feel? And over time, what this really allowed me to do is start doing more things that made me feel good. And if I tried the things like hot yoga that everybody said would be good and I didn't like it, I didn't do it. When I started to do things for me without worrying about what someone else would do or what someone else would think of me doing those things, it allowed me to start creating my own self-care routine that worked for me, that worked for my nervous system. And my self-care routine is it's not anything fancy, right? It's the simple things that I do for myself that make me feel good. It's hot baths. It's fresh sheets every Sunday, homemade dinners, 3 walks around the block every day, watching old Disney movies, whatever brings me the feel-good feelings that day. And, it's the type of things that always made me feel good, but I was just neglecting myself for too long that I forgot. But again, this takes time and a lot of reparenting. It's about making the unconscious conscious again so that you can change the programs running under the surface of your mind that dictate how you operate so that you can truly rest without guilting and shaming yourself for it. And speaking of negative self-talk, that leads us to number 3. Talk to yourself like you would talk to your child or your best friend. Your mind is either your worst enemy or your best friend. And right now, if you are beating yourself up for something, and you know that if your child or best friend was doing that, you tell them to stop talking to themselves like that, then why are you doing it to yourself? One of the easiest ways to improve yourself is to start treating yourself nicer. Be more kind to yourself. Be your own cheerleader. The world is crazy. Life is a game, and the rules are all made up. The other day, for example, I had to throw out one of my plants that died. And I literally found myself saying out loud, I somehow managed to kill another one. Like making myself believe that it was something that I did that made the plant die. And, who knows? Maybe it was something that I did wrong. I'll never know, I guess. But it's times like that where I have to catch myself and be like, hey, would you talk that way to your best friend? Would you talk that way to your child if you could afford one? No. So why would I talk to me like that? So I was like, yeah, Peter, you're a good plant daddy. You win some and you lose some, and that's life. And then I went on with my day. So start calling yourself out and then shift it, reframe it. I don't care if you have to fake it till you make it, believe it till you achieve it. Start being nicer to yourself. Because when you speak to yourself in ways that are more loving and more caring and more gentle, you're essentially becoming the new parent to your inner child that you never had before. And when you make this part of your daily routine and a way of life to just be more compassionate and gentle with yourself, you are, in essence, creating safety for yourself from the inside out. And when you create more safety for yourself, that survival version of you finally feels safe enough to allow authentic version of you a moment to shine through. The way that you speak to yourself is either making your nervous system feel safe or afraid. There's very little in between gray area. So, if it feels weird to talk to yourself like you would your best friend or child, then think about it in that way. Check in with yourself. Is what I just said to myself causing my nervous system to feel safer or more afraid and on edge? And it's really kind of an odd antithesis that when we put too much pressure on ourselves to get ahead, we oftentimes end up falling further behind because we're caving in to what our mind wants instead of honoring what our body needs. And so you get to this place where you're already burnt out And then you just pile on more stress with your negative self-talk and self-imposed pressure. The world is already a pretty incredibly stressful place to live sometimes. So if you do nothing else for yourself, then at least alleviate some of the unneeded and extra pressure that you put on yourself that just makes it worse. So just to kind of put this all together, right? Become more aware of your own source. Shift the narratives driven by your subconscious programming and start treating yourself in a way that allows you to create safety from the inside out. And what's the reward in all this inner work, right? The reward, I'll tell you from personal experience, getting yourself back. Getting back the version of you that supports your own values, beliefs, and intentions, and allowing that version of you to run your life instead of the survival version of you that's more concerned with doing things according to your past behaviors. But it all starts internally with a change in our perceptions of rest and self-care. So here's my challenge for you, Burnout Bestie. Try one thing today that makes you feel good. And when that voice gets louder, because it will, telling you that you should be doing something more productive right now or taking care of everyone else besides yourself, stick up for yourself. Reframe that negative self-talk into self-compassion and just notice what it feels like. It might feel really uncomfortable at first because it goes against all of your subconscious patterns of your past. But as you allow yourself to soak in more and more evidence that putting yourself first actually pays off, I promise this is going to become easier over time. And by the way, before I let y'all go to do the inner work, if you're looking for a framework to really start taking better care of yourself, definitely check out my signature program, my little baby, the Millennial Mindset Makeover, where I walk you through my 4 R's framework to not only healing your nervous system, but even bigger than that, overcoming the conditioning that may be keeping you stuck. You can learn more about that and subscribe to the podcast newsletter at www.themillennialreset.com. And don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you listen so that you never miss an opportunity to support yourself in this healing journey. Thanks so much for tuning in and can't wait to see you again on the next episode of The Millennial Reset.